Well, morning, fellow zombies. Are we alive yet? Are we awake yet? Because I'm still getting there. It's the 8th. Is it the 9th? I think it's the 9th of November 2025, Sunday. It is early in the morning. It's almost close to 5 o'clock. Give it about another minute. Kudos to the artist in recovery slash Darryl P for him getting the benefits. California lucked out. I'm still out. But a dark video this is. But not for long. Not for another minute or less. Hey, he's got a face. I wanted to show you something. For those guys who are belonging to the vets. It's the last weekend that we're having a mobile Vietnam Wall event. Memorial, actually. And a story involving this. Yeah. See it? It's my brother's. Light off. The thing about that was my brother's. This wall, this mobile wall, had been in the Antelope Valley for about 20 years. This is the last weekend of it, coming up on Veterans Day, which is tomorrow. And Tuesday it'll be taken down permanently. It'll be dismantled, passed off to people, including Gold Star members who have lost relatives in the war and then cease to exist. But while I was here, it traveled in the Antelope Valley every year to one particular point in time, to another place, park to park, I guess. But Palmdale Regional Amphitheater or something like that had hosted it for nearly 20 years. This will be the 20th year on it. It is a living tribute to those who had fallen in the Vietnam War a long time ago. The community who was in charge of it, I think they felt it was time. I don't know why. We still needed to learn a lot more about the Vietnam War that we can learn about this. But the veterans are dying off. Not many veterans left who remembered and been through it. And maybe that is just one of the things, one of the reasons. But my brother, being a vet himself, we had traveled to the wall. It was the most moving, emotional experience for both of us. It's not just seeing your names etched, it's something about it to any vet or anybody who lived with a vet for a long time. Something that is not explainable. A feeling of remorse, of sorrow or regret, of connection, a longing. She's awake again. My brother, being a vet, he wasn't part of the Vietnam era. He was way too young, and if it continued another several more years, he would have been part of it. Thankfully, he wasn't. It was a place for vets to gather, to talk. He got the sweater as a reminder, memorial to them. It meant a great deal. It was part of my brother's past of sorts. Walking up and down those areas where they're allowed to, and seeing the names is one thing, but to see the veterans who were taking care of it, who had been there, it was something for them. It was something a civilian wouldn't understand unless the civilian had already been there, through it with them, would understand more of it. I couldn't. My brother being a veteran of a younger generation, he understood something of it. My brother was the United States Navy SEAL. His path was hard going through the SEALs. I've talked about it many times in my videos about it. I hadn't talked about it as much because it gets harder and harder for me to deal with each year of the loss. I know I get older, and probably getting closer and closer to the time anyways myself, but my dog is fussing. The old girl. As old as the Vietnam War. It keeps them going over. She's fussing, and I gotta get her wrapped up with warmth. She's gonna hate it. But keeps it warm in this place. How do you talk about your family when the emotions choke up your words, your thoughts, your feelings? How is it that you're able to convey it to anybody of how much the loss means to a person? It's unimaginable and unfathomable depth of sorrow and grief. The reason why I do my channel the way it is, at times when I need to talk about the grief. I know I've been talking about politics when I can, and hardly ever the grieving process, except when I get triggered. This is one of those days that gets triggered because anything dealing with the veterans is a triggering time for me. And this was one of those times that I try to get close to my brother, but I can't as much. My brother meant everything to me. He meant the world to me. And I don't know how I can explain it any further. Said before about my brother's service. And it makes it harder every time anniversaries come up, because I miss my big brother a lot. He didn't die in war. He died of old age. But a war was in his mind and his body. Trans-ischemic attacks in his brain, several points, affected his motor skills, mobility, communication, primarily. And it was hard to interpret what he wanted, especially when he couldn't communicate it effectively enough. It was hard for him to do that. Well, when he was able, and he was actually able to get around, we had a car working during that time. The place I went to say and pay our respects to the fallen. I feel like I need to go, but I can't go. I'm held back by my own grief and my own pain, because anything I happen to see regarding veterans, I am reminded of my brother who was a veteran. Mattered a great deal in my life. I see the sweater, had it hanging, put it on. Warm as it is and small as it is, but still it was my brother's. When he had a lot of thinner physique, he could barely wear it. But it was something for him to wear anyway, to be part of something. A brotherhood. One of the harder things for me to do when I'm in this community college of mine, and I'm taking a class concerning about the wars between Korea and the Sucking Gulf, is part of it my brother was involved with, and others it wasn't. I was trying to explain it to the professor, but apparently I hadn't been able to explain it any further to the gentleman. I may get this one sent over to him. My brother had been in the first Gulf, survived it, came back home. I had friends who went over and also survived it as well. But the second Gulf, when it came in, my brother and I and also our mother, which well before she passed, we saw it on television what the hell happened at 9/11. The thing about experiencing previous wars is just having a hard time to explain it to the younger generation or to anybody else what kind of horror that you actually seen. My mother had experienced the Vietnam War through the television like everybody else had back then. And she had a hard time trying to talk with anybody else about it, let alone her family. And her own siblings as well. We had a couple of uncles, actually, had a couple of uncles that survived World War II, and one also survived Korea. And they never spoke about their war experiences that they went through. Ma couldn't explain it to me about how Grandma felt when she saw the war happening in World War II. What was her shock and awe like? What was her feelings like? What was her panic? What was going on through her head? Except that she'd seen her children drafted, enlisted. No, they weren't drafted, enlisted. They were already in the Navy. And they had survived Pearl Harbor, and they came back home. One couldn't make the trip. The other one we didn't keep track of. There were no reunions that I knew of concerning about the Korean War. My uncle wouldn't go it. He already had enough of it. Regarding the first Gulf War, if there was any reunions, my brother had never been to them because he couldn't deal with them. It's not the veterans, it's the memories of what he went through. It's a thing that's not translatable to civilians because unless you've been through it, you don't know it. No matter how many times you can read something out of a textbook, there is something about going through this experience as hard as hell. There have been other vets who have managed to break that barrier to put it into a perspective that the public can understand. In the class I've taken, there's a couple of veterans out there who wrote books that my professor is still managing to get us review it and look at them and try to analyze them. And one was based off of a book, actually based off of stories that happened to this one veteran who tried to put it into a, well, he called it truth. He tried to call it reality. Basically, he was writing a book of fiction because he didn't make it factual enough for us to about the soldiers that went through it. He could give out a little bit of descriptions or major descriptions of how soldiers went through the Vietnam War, but he gave them different names, either probably to protect the identities or probably saving his own. But this other book talking about the Second Gulf War made it into a television series. The book, I'm going through the audio version of it. I haven't got the hard copy of it. And it's graphic enough. Done by a reporter who embedded himself for 2 months with the Marine Recon Group going through Iraq and into Baghdad. My brother probably would have watched it, tried to enjoy it, but that would have also gotten him to PTSD flashbacks like crazy. I checked the biography of this guy who did the story Generation Kill. The one that got translated into a miniseries into HBO. Apparently last year he passed away from PTSD, killed himself. That was the thing of being talked about among the veteran groups out there. Past 20 years. When the Vietnam War started, it was a point where some veterans were still trying to talk to each other about their experiences and how they were trying to deal with the nightmare still there that haunts them. In a way, it affected me too, because I'd seen my brother go through the flashbacks to the point where he lost himself and didn't know who I was and where he was. My brother one time was sitting in his favorite blue recliner rocker. He woke up from a nightmare. He didn't know where the hell he was, and it was in a panic. I had to talk him down. He was just walking around in circles trying to figure things out. This wasn't where he was. Why wasn't... There was a lot of things coming out of his mouth I didn't even realize and understand, but except one thing. He was lost in his dream. He wasn't sleepwalking. He was reliving. And seeing my brother like that with the eyes so terrified. I wasn't about to call the cops on the guy. I just had to keep talking at him, reassuring him, telling him who I was. Even my dogs were scared because he was freaked. Flashbacks became more than what he could handle. He had to keep getting medical assistance for it. And psychological. I really began to empathize with the veterans out there. It didn't matter which particular war, of what they had gone through. I began to really empathize with them a lot strongly of the terror that they had to face. Songs came out back in the 80s about the Vietnam War. One was called Still in Saigon. Still in Saigon in my mind. Charlie Daniels, folk singer, rock and roll, country. He sang this one, but it didn't stay on the radio too long. It's available on YouTube, but it explains something about how the vets had gotten through it. I don't know if he actually was a veteran himself, but he was explaining it. And the more I listened, the more I understood. I understood. My brother and I went to other meetings, and being a 12-stepper, we've been in the program for a long while, and we met vets. But they couldn't talk about their experience out there with the civilians. They just don't have the perspective or understanding about it. And I didn't want to push it on them. I probably would have wanted to learn more about it, but you just don't. It's an unspoken rule. It's a barrier you don't cross. The pain is that deep that some veterans just can't get past it. They were talking about it over the past 20 to 30 years, how many veterans have lost their lives due to PTSD. The wars they've been through, and the longer it was that they could no longer deal with the haunting memories. Sights and sounds, the five senses picking up where their body left off, where their memories were. That surrounding them was their place. I couldn't describe it any other than the place of where their nightmares were. Something would set them off, some kind of trigger, and then boom. That's why the veterans had to gather, had to keep trying to protect themselves, keep getting help, talk to other veterans about it. The younger ones taking their lives because they couldn't deal with the combat stress that they went through. Civilians who hadn't gone through it or stayed around with the vets to understand a little bit of it, we just don't know the pure terror of what they've gone through, because they have a hard time putting it into a perspective, into a language we can understand. My brother in this life is not here, but I have to be a mouthpiece for him. I can't communicate effectively to the veterans of what I know of what their combat experience. I know what I had been through in my own lifetime. And sometimes it's not translatable. Except you're stuck with this fear, you're stuck with this terror, you're stuck with the triggers that you have. And it puts your body and your brain into a mode that you cannot put it into an adequate perspective. Even if I'm talking to a therapist about it, which I do. I talk to a few of them. And it's hard to put it into a language. They can understand the medical language, but they're listening for the language coming out of my mouth of what I've experienced. If you've been watching my channels, you know me and the medical establishment don't see eye to eye. Try to save me, yet try to kill me at the same time. According to my mind, according to my experiences, and I stay the hell away from them, despite my body falling apart on me, literally, and my brain rotting away. I talked to a therapist about it. I still haven't got my body into a doctor's office in a hell of a long while to see how bad my corpse is decomposing at this point. I could try to sound it as a joke, but it isn't a joke. They're serious, they're almost deadly serious, trying to keep me alive by killing me, one way or another. But it's nothing like a combat soldier going through that much stress in a situation either he volunteered or he got drafted for it. But these days, in the past 40 years or more than that, it's an all volunteer, not drafted. An all volunteer military force going in. You volunteer to put your body and your brain subjugated to these stresses, to act as a guard, to act as a soldier, an airman, as a mariner. And it cost. It cost. The veterans who walked through the jungles of Nam, dying off left and right. The ones who witnessed it with a camera. The ones who actually picked up a gun. And there's first Gulf War. And even those veterans are dying off. And then there's the veterans in the second Gulf. Sometimes walls that have names on them are not just about their form and function. This one is going to be gone forever. I have photographs, but they're buried in my drives, and I don't know where the hell they are. I have memories in my head of my brother and I being at the gathering, but I had been separated because I wasn't there. I had never been there. And after hearing the stories and seeing the images, I don't think I ever wanted it to be there. But when 9/11 kicked, everybody here in the homeland was there, one way or another. I may not have been physically there in New York City, but witnessing the experience on television live was just as traumatic. Probably less because of the distance and also technology. But I had witnessed. I had felt the fear. I had tasted adrenaline in my mouth. I had experienced my brain losing touch of reality. I had tasted pure panic. And I was afraid to die. I'm living here in the West Coast when 9/11 hit. I had seen what the East Coast had gone through. And every so often I am afraid of what we're going to be going through if or when it happens here. In any way, shape, or form. Just how much fear and panic we're all going to be if something or someone attacks. I couldn't share my brother's PTSD of combat. But is there anybody else who's witnessed? I identify with them. Even for the ones who had gone through Pearl Harbor. Not just identifying with the soldiers and sailors, but the civilians witnessed and saw and experienced. But more so on the homeland when we got the information on the radio and then we saw the news clips and we saw the papers, like their generation did. And how did they react to it? Now keep in mind, the World War II generation had previously about less than 20 years. They were just getting out of World War I when they had to go back into it again. They already gone through a depression. And now they had to gear up for war. What are we going through right now is scaring the hell out of me with our current political crap going on. And if we happen to go through another attack on a homeland, I don't know if I'm going to be able to deal with it or not. We weren't going through any economic issues that I remembered before 9/11. But we had been attacked. I was witness to it. And I saw the aftermath. I saw the people's faces. And I saw the struggle as they tried to go through the rubble, trying to find survivors or I'd felt the fear and the adrenaline for days. And I couldn't shake the feeling off. For years. Now, I'm having a hard time dealing with it. I can't even go over to a veteran's wall to pay my final respects. Because I'm already there. I'm among those who are the walking witnesses. I'm one of those who hadn't walked through one sort of jungle, but walked through another jungle. I didn't have to feel the pain or horror of a bullet entering me. I saw the collapse of a building crushing down on me through the eyes of the witnesses and feeling that level of fear and dread. That is what I felt on that day of days. I can't relate with the veterans who went through combat. But they had their jungle and I walked through mine. And just as Charlie Daniels was singing, he was still in Saigon. I'm in my own version of Saigon. And there's stuff to be written about it, to be told to future generations. I know the pain, I know the fear, I know the adrenaline. I'm experiencing that taste.